Good morning. Today is Wednesday, September 21st, 2022. This is the Arlington County Board of Equalization hearings. There's 6 cases on the agenda. The first case we're starting with is RPC 34027-005 at 2611 Richmond Highway. Mr. Sean Radin is here to speak on behalf of the owner. Mr. Radin, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about the property.
Hi, good morning. Yes, this property is known as Airport Plaza 2. This is a 197,918 square foot Class B, C office in the Crystal City submarket. The issue with this property, as we've discussed over several years, is really difficult time with vacancy and leasing up. And so what we've seen here is multiple years of high vacancy and trouble, getting their space leased. And so the main issue that we have and that we're discussing today, it really comes down to two factors. One is the amount of time to lease up the space, and two is the cap rate used by the county this year. And so, as we look through our information and our general summary here on page 2 and 3. On page 3 is our income analysis, where most of our information is presented. And what we tried to do is be very conservative and keep our model as close to the county model as we could. And we used all the same rent inputs, vacancy, collection, expense information as the county. But where we did make an adjustment was to the capitalization rate and also to the discount for lease up. So in the discount for lease up, instead of a 1-year discount for lease up to allow them to lease up space in 1 year, which is what the county model called for, we used 2 years in this discount. And this is primarily because of the continued problem they've had several years to still achieving an extremely high vacancy rate. And the issue really for this property has been the time of to lease up this space. So we did a little research looking at the submarket. We looked at CoStar and other data to see how long space was taking to lease up. And what we found was that 2 years is a more appropriate and even a conservative estimate to lease this amount of space. And per CoStar, we're seeing that amount of space could take several years to lease up. And so I will go through that information in just a second. And then the other issue is the capitalization rate. And what we determined previously for this property was that the non-metro cap rate was more appropriate, with also the Crystal City bid added into it. And so that was the 7.343 cap rate that we used and what was determined appropriate last year as well. So we've included, the rent roll. You can see it's extremely high vacancy again, and but I want to get to the information from CoStar, which discusses the amount of time necessary to lease up this type of space. And so that information begins on my page 11, which you'll see a report here starting from CoStar. And this is median months on the market for Crystal City and other, what they call peer properties, similar properties in the submarket. And you can see that time is 33 months for the peers, 31 months for Crystal City submarket. And as we go down here, months to lease, this is vacancy analysis here, months to lease by block size of square footage. And this is the type of square footage that we're looking for. I've circled it here, from 50,000 square feet to 99,000 square feet. Chris, over here's approaching 30 months here. You can see that highlight for you. This is on my page 12 of 18. And all the indications that we've seen here are pointing to over 2 years to lease up this amount of space. And so as we continue here, there's negative absorption here, meaning there's just, a lot of square footage available and it's not leasing up. And so hurting that further is the fact that there's even more space coming onto the market and sublease space available. And so folks are looking to lease out space they're already leasing and often discounting that, and they're trying to get rid of space. And that's here on page 15. You can see that. And as we continue, we see the construction activity. And here there's under construction over 3 million square feet of office space available in the near future. And so all of that goes to show that it's actually severely hurting this property's ability to lease up. And that's really the reason why we added the time in the discount for lease up to 24 months as opposed to the 1 year. I thank you for this opportunity to go through some of this information, and I will conclude right there.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Peralta for the county, please. Can you turn your microphone on?
Yes, thank you. For this property, we didn't really have much that differed from the appellant's pro forma. We do have a difference in the the lease space. They're using a slightly lower rate than we have. For the leases in place, we have an average of about $33 per square foot. The range is from $29 to about $38 per square foot. When looking at the other differences in this property, we don't have much other than the 1 year lease up, excess vacancy deduction below the line. I believe the board is familiar that we look at this assessment annually, and if the situation is still present as far as the vacant square footage, we account for that every year. With that, if you have any questions, we are available. Thank you. We did actually change the cap rate, just referencing last year's board decision, and so everything else kind of falls in line. This building is built in 1985, so we did adjust that cap rate with the bid rate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Questions from board members? Mr. Matzkin.
Thank you. Since most of this relies on the probable absorption rate and how long the landlord's going to have to be carrying vacant space below the line, and you're saying, this is to the appellant, of course, you're saying that need to write off at least 2 years worth of vacancy to account for slow absorption. What happens if nothing or very little is absorbed this year, and next year you come back with a vacancy percentage or square footage about the same, and you're going to make the same case next year? Well, it's going to take 2 years. So every year this stuff is written off for 2 years until hopefully eventually it goes away or it's extremely manageable. That seems to me like that's an awful lot of double counting into the unforeseen future. Could you comment on that, please?
Sure. Well, we're looking at, in our opinion, the market value as of the date of valuation. And I think and our position is that prospective buyers would be looking at how long the market is showing will take to lease this space up. And when they are looking to make, let's say, a fair market offer or purchase, they would consider the fact that the market is showing that it takes over 2 years to make this adjustment, and they would use that to remove value from the bottom line when determining what the fair market value is for this property. And so, keeping that along those lines, we've made the conservative 2-year adjustment, because really it's showing it could be 3+ years to lease up that block of space. But we made that, stretched it out over 2 years instead of 3 or longer. But we feel that is an appropriate adjustment for this property based on what we're seeing in the market for that kind of square footage.
I'll let it go. Thank you. Thank you for your response.
Okay, any other questions from board members? Mr. Hoffman.
Has this property ever been marketed for sale? Are you aware of any kind of efforts to sell or redevelop or put a site plan in, or do anything with it?
No, it not presently.
Okay.
Okay, anything else? Okay, Mr. Peralta, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yes, thank you. Don't really have too much to add. We don't consider the 2 years in any other case. We ask the board to confirm this at the revised value of $22,030,200. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Radin, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Great. Thank you so much. And again, in our model, we try to address the market concerns on leasing up this amount of square footage. It's shown that a more appropriate time for lease up is 2 years or above. That's what the market's bearing. That's what we believe would be indicative of the fair market value, would be to use a 2-year discount for lease up as opposed to 1. Now, we understand that the county may not use 2 years, but just because it may not be the correct model that is being utilized. I mean, we feel that 2 years is more appropriate based on the current market conditions, and maybe it's time that they adopt a 2-year program for this type of square footage based on what we're seeing in the market. So we would ask that that be used here. In this case, we made some adjustments there to the cap rate, and I believe they may have adjusted that in their revised model. So as long as that's no longer a concern, the real difference really is the time to leave. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. All righty, it's just among the board members. What's everybody think on this? Mr. Lawson.
Yes, I guess first thing I'll talk about is the 2-year versus 1 year. And I can't remember when it was, but a couple of weeks ago, we had this lengthy discussion about that exact subject. I think myself I was somewhat sympathetic to perhaps going to the 2 years, but that was not the call that the rest of the board made. And in order to be consistent and equal in equalization, I think we have to go with the 1 year to be consistent. The only thing I saw, and I'll throw this out and see if anyone else picks up on it or agrees, the top 2 lines on the appellant pro forma, the first 2 lines I thought might be more accurate than the revised county. And what I did is I took the bottom line of the 33 million, and then I deducted the county below the line deductions. Ended up at 21,292,700. And I'm not adamant about that, but I just want to see if anyone else agrees.
Okay, I'll do a little math on that. Mr. Yates, you had your hand up?
Well, I was going to pretty much say what Barnes said. This 2-year thing keeps coming up, and I do believe it's legitimate. I know where the guidelines are, and that's for equalization where we have to stick, but it's something that needs to be really looked at and addressed going forward. But I don't see we can change. I didn't see changing anything based on equalization in the guidelines from their revised numbers. But I think it's definitely something that's got to be looked at. It's too common.
Yeah, I would agree. Barnes, I just did the math on that. I mean, you're talking about a difference of $30,000. I don't, you're looking at gross potential and then doing a lot of adjustments off of it. So I would not tend to go that way, but
Okay.
that's just my thought. Mr. Matskin, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I was just going to pile on the 2-year versus 1-year versus 3-year. Personally, I agree with the department's approach, but because it's such a common point of contention from appellants, I would love, just us talking, would love for the department to make some kind of formal pronouncement as to the rationale. I think I get it and understand it, but I may be an outlier. And somehow, somewhere, they can't just say, well, that's our position. That's not good enough for taxpayers. They need to say why it's their position. And I would love to see that somewhere for appellants to see it formally and digest it and hopefully avoid this redundancy that they have to go through and we have to go through.
Okay, noted. Any other questions? Or comments, or Mr. Hoffman?
I think it's consensus, but just wanted to say that I think the county provision looks good based on the cap rate being adjusted for non-metro, because it is a pretty long haul to metro.
No question.
I agree. All right, any other discussion then? All right, I will move to confirm the county's reduced number of 22,030,200. Do I have a second? Okay, motion and a second by Mr. Hoffman. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. The assessment's reduced to the county's revised number of 22,030,200. Okay, we will move on with the same folks to the second case, RPC 34027016, 2711 Richmond Highway. Mr. Radin, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property, sir.
Thank you. Good morning. Well, we have another office property, which is a sister property here, also built around the same time. This is 2711 Richmond, also known as Airport Plaza 1. A similar property with similar issues here. We try to, again, keep our position very conservative, similar to the county model. Again, we used a similar, used the county model for rent, vacancy, and collection and expenses and such. Again, the main concern here, similarly, is the cap rate, which again is we're requesting a non-metro cap rate similar to last year, as well as a 2-year period for lease up based on the market conditions that we saw and discussed in the last case. I don't want to belabor this point, but again, we feel that the market is indicating 2 years as a more appropriate time for the discount for lease up. So we used the 2 years in our model based on the same data that we found for the property next door. And that is also here for you in this paperwork that we've provided beginning on my page 17, where we begin to show the market conditions, the amount of time that it takes to lease up this kind of square footage. Again, we've shown that the data indicates that more than 2 years is the time that it would take to lease up this kind of square footage. Again, there's issues with more square footage coming online, square footage not being leased, things of this nature, sublease square footage going up. So all of this making it difficult to lease this square footage and adding to the time that it would take to lease up. And so again, we built our model conservatively using all of the county data except for changing the cap rate to the non-metro cap rate, and then adding 1 year to the discount for lease up. After those values are put into our model, which you see on my page 3, our indicated value is $14,666,000, well, 667 round. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Peralta for the county, please.
Yes, thank you. Here we have similar case. This building is slightly older at 1981. So there's a slight difference in cap rate based on, I guess, the similar understanding that the metro, non-metro cap rate was used with the bid rate. We kind of share the same rental rates for vacant and leased square footage. There's slight difference in what they feel is vacant versus what they reported in the 2021 rent roll. So there's a slight difference there in the allocation of square footage. But overall, the main difference again is the 1 year versus 2 years. With that, I asked that the original assessment be confirmed. We did show in the test it's slightly higher based on the numbers that we came up with, but we asked the board to confirm the original assessment on this case. Thank you.
Okay, very similar. Any questions on this case from board members? Mr. Lawson.
Yeah, this is for Rob. Rob, if you're going with the assessment rather than the test, shouldn't you, however, have used the test cap rate?
Well, when we look at the new numbers, this is originally we had a higher per square foot rate on the original assessment. When we tested, well, there's actually a combination, 2875 for the leases in place, and then I believe 2770 was a combination of rates there. But when you break it down, our test is more accurate, and it's given more of the 2021 information that we received.
No, that's my question was,
That's a good question.
the cap rate on the test is 7.44, but your assessment, which you're going with this time, is 7.19. Shouldn't the cap rate be the 7.443?
That's why we adjusted it in the test.
I know, but you're not going with the test.
Right, but the test is higher, so.
I understand, but I mean, why did you make the cap rate higher in the test?
Because similar to the last property, it is considered non-metro.
Okay, so then why don't you use it with the assessment?
Because we have the new information to test. I'm not understanding what that 2020 that column D is set as far as whatever we had for the 22 assessment. we copy that verbatim on column D. We don't make adjustments to that column. We make all the adjustments in the test or the revision in column F.
That's how he does it. He doesn't go back and change anything in the original. Once you move to the test, you use the test, but if it ends up higher,
But it's the wrong cap rate.
yeah. Oh, look, he also changed the operating expenses,
Mhm.
and that's why this number ends up lower, because this is a lower operating expenses than the test.
You know,
So the question is, should we be using 950 for operating expenses in the test column? And then that number ends up becoming lower.
Well, I think it's
Okay, I think that's in the comment section. So we're a question still for folks. Any other questions? Mr. Matzkin.
This is for the department. It's not the numbers I'm talking about, it's more the methodology. Very quickly, in the test column, row 5, the history is that other, whatever it may be, I just trust it exists. It's on the mid-high 30,000s, but in 2021, the most recent year, it's the low 70,000s, and in the test, you took that. Whereas we hear a lot that you try, whenever you can, to not just take last year's number, but rather the trend. And here's 3 years trend in the mid-high 30,000s, and only 1 year, last year, almost double that, about double that. And that's the one you put into your test. Now, it doesn't change the test number. I'm not quibbling about dollars, but again, methodology. Why would you overtake the trend to favor in your test just last year?
I could agree with that, Ken. I could agree with leveling it out through the history.
You did 1 million of these, and this was a little, yeah. But thank you.
Okay, any final questions? Okay, Mr. Peralta, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yes, thank you. Just trying to do quick calculations. So in this test, if we were to level it out, I guess the other income would be closer to 45,900, and then if you adjust the expenses to 950, if the board feels compelled to do so, I believe the NOI would be still similar to the original assessment. In fact, it would probably be higher without doing the total calculations, but going down, including the excess vacancy as well. Again, we're using annual assessment for this case as well as other cases. We do look at the 1 year excess vacancy to the point that Ken made on the earlier case. The reason why we don't adjust for 2 years is simply that if they lease up a subsequent year, then we've already allocated 2 years for that assessment, giving that discount. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Radin, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Yes, thank you so much. And, I appreciate, all the discussion. And I think what's clear here, I mean, the cap rate that we're requesting, I think, is the appropriate cap rate. We just, it doesn't make sense to us that we would be using the lower cap rate when it's clear it's the non-metro. I mean, it may have been a mistake originally or what have you. I'm not sure. But, I just feel like we really should be looking at, the higher cap rate that's appropriate for this building. We also feel a longer discount. We discussed that. But, essentially, I think, it would be fair to have us use the proper cap rate in this case. So thank you so much. We appreciate your consideration.
Okay, thank you. All right, now it's just among the board members. So did anybody run the numbers? Mr. Matzkin.
I did. I'm going back and forth. At first, when Barnes brought it up, I said, yeah, use the right cap rate for the original assessment. But then I thought, and I run numbers, it comes out to just over 17 million. I capped the NOI at the higher rate and deduct everything else the same. But then I was thinking, and this is for us to discuss, of course, I was thinking that Well, no, the test is better numbers based on 2021 input, maybe minus the $30,000 or $40,000 of other overcount. And you go with the original assessment. I'm torn on this, but I'm coming down to you get the original assessment or the test, and you don't mix and match. Because again, the test has better overall numbers. So that's, I guess that's right, 60-40, that's where I came down.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Lawson?
Yeah, let me share a thought with Ken. Ken, here's what I think is wrong with that, is that, you know, the expenses is at 950 and 70% vacancy, or maybe it's 60, I don't know, whatever it is, but it's a huge vacancy. And so on other cases, we've upped the expenses based on the fact that once this gets more leased, there's going to be higher expenses. So that's why I think we should go with the right cap on the assessment.
Well, in the test, it's up significantly over the trend.
Right, that's what I was gonna say. I mean, it's had high vacancy historically, but the expenses are not 950.
Right.
Counting is generous in that. $9 is still way more than the history and the expenses.
That's because it's been so leased. It's been so small a percent that's been leased.
Well,
So the county did what you suggested,
Yeah.
is Mark's point. They've done that.
they've increased it
County agrees with you.
with the assumption of the increase of
Yeah.
almost 30%. I mean, you're looking at 730, 718, 630, and then went up to 9.
You had 300,000 to pay for the additional janitorial.
Right.
Yeah, I think they covered that in expenses. I think the numbers above make, as far as looking at 21, they make more sense. Now, maybe, yes, they could have leveled that one out.
Yeah.
But, and they've adjusted the cap.
But for equalization, don't you think we should go with the right cap with the assessment?
Right, but I think, just to jump in here, I agree with Ken on this and Mark. You know, when you appeal, it opens up the case and, you know, we get all of, you know, the information and more current information. So I think the county is correct in adjusting the cap rate on the test, but you do have better information, you have better numbers. And so when you do adjust for that, you know, and it comes out higher, I think the county's right to say, right, well, this is what it really should be, but we're not saying that. We'll leave it where it is initially, and it'll catch up next year.
Yeah, that's
For
what
this year. Next, they will change that number at the bottom.
Correct. But I think the correct cap rate with the correct numbers, which by appealing and opening up all these new numbers, is higher.
Yeah.
So they're at a better position to take what they've got from the original, and then it'll all wash out next year on the new assessment.
And that's based on the current guidelines in 2 years and so forth,
Mhm.
or 1 year existing.
I got talked into it.
Yeah.
Okay.
This way, if
I-
the county had recommended that we went with. the
We would
test,
also
I'd
have
be
to
okay with
adjust
it.
it. If we adjust that, we got to adjust up there too.
Right,
Yeah.
all
Right.
that's
my point.
And I ran the numbers, even if you increase the expenses to the 950,
Uh-huh.
it comes to about 17 million and a half, you know. So it's really a minor difference, but I don't really see how we can just increase the expenses just to make it work.
to make the numbers.
Okay.
All right, well, that being said, then I'm going to move to confirm the county at 17,823,500. Do I have a second?
Well,
Come on, Mark.
Okay.
all right.
I got a lot of you. I'm going to go ahead and pick Mr. Metzgen there. He was the closest to. So all in favor?
Once again.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. It's unanimous. The county's confirmed at 17,823,500.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Radin. Okay, we're keeping with Mr. Peralta, and I believe we have Mr. Harmon presenting for the appellant.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Okay. All right, the next case on the agenda is RPC 190020007 at 3100 Clarendon Boulevard. So, Mr. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property, sir.
Yes, thank you. Madam Chairwoman, members of the board, members of the county, good morning. 3100 Clarendon Boulevard is a 261,000 square foot building It's at the intersection of Clarendon and Washington Boulevard, directly across from the Clarendon Metro Station. The 2021 assessment represents a $3 million increase over the 2021 value the board set for this property of $90,600,000. The county test represents an $18.6 million increase over the 2021 value. However, this property is not in a better position as of the date of value 2022 than it was 1 year prior. In fact, we now have a third year of stable income at right around $5 million reported. We are able to more accurately gauge what the actual value of the property is. Why is a $3 million increase in assessed value incorrect for this property? To start, I'd like to direct your attention to the NOI over the past 4 years. Average NOI over this period is 4.6 million, yet the assessment is at 6.2 million. Not shown is NOI prior to 2018, which was lower than the 2018 figure of 2.8 million. This is all to say that the property has clearly struggled to achieve stabilization at market rates. The property has reported steady NOI over the past 3 years, right around $5 million. Even with the historical NOI at just over $5 million over the past 3 years, the appellant imputes income on the vacant space to arrive at an NOI that is $800,000 higher than the 2020 and 2021 NOI for the stabilized column D. Now, back to why a $3 million increase in assessed value is not appropriate. Last year at the board hearing, we presented evidence about a co-working tenant operating as UO Clarendon, who had given back 40,000 square feet of office space at the end of 2020. After having spent the money to build out the space for a co-working tenant and not recoup the benefit, the landlord was able to release the space in 2021 to another co-working company, Industrious, on a percent rent lease with minimum income thresholds that must be met before the tenant pays any rent. We have to ask, why would the owner enter into this arrangement knowing that the previous tenant, a similar co-working company, had failed in the space? Several reasons underpin this decision. First, the property has an additional 50,000 square feet of vacant space already. Adding the 40,000 square foot that was built out for the prior co-working tenant to the vacant stock would not improve the outlook for the property, and keeping the space occupied does not limit the property's ability to lease to any other tenants who may emerge. Essentially, there is no opportunity cost to signing this tenant to a percent rent lease. Second, the owner hoped with the hybrid work models that have been in place, having the co-working space available would entice new tenants for the other vacant office space, with the assumption that tenants, knowing that they could easily ramp up their space as needed by utilizing this co-working space, would make the property more attractive. Third, the owner is seeing the same data we all are. Office absorption in the county has been negative over the past 2 years, and a tenant on a percent rent lease is better than no tenant. Finally, the tenant agreed to take the space as is, so turnover costs were minimal. So the 40,000 square feet was relet to another co-working space on a percent rent lease, requiring this company achieve a minimum income before any rent is due. What have they paid on this lease as of the date of value, and what is the outlook? This company has not paid any rent on the 40,000 square feet of lease space as of the date of value. Given the current market demand for this type of offering, with co-working companies continuing to falter and go bankrupt, the owner does not anticipate the company reaching the minimum income thresholds that trigger rent payments in 2022. The board reduced the value of this property to $90,668,000 at the hearing last year. The county claims this property, despite entering into a lease for 40,000 square feet that has yet to generate any income, is now worth $18.6 million more. The appellant's column on the summary page calculates income based on leases in place, uses actual prior year pass-through, parking, and other income. We impute operating expenses at a rate that is the same as the county and adjust the cap rate to reflect the increased riskiness of the property due to the tenancy, the market absorption, and the reduced value add of metro proximity due to both work from home policies and metro running far less frequent trains. The result is reflective of what the property can hope to achieve. In sum, the NOI achieved at the property has averaged $4.6 million over the past 4 years just over $5 million over the past 3 years. The appellant imputes NOI at $5.8 million. The county imputes NOI at $6.2 million and contends it should be as high as $7.3 million. The property is not worth $3 million more on January 1, 2022 than 1 year prior, largely due to being contractually signed to a lease on a percentage rent basis for 40,000 square feet of office space that has yet to reach the minimum thresholds and is not anticipated to pay any rent. As such, the taxpayer respectfully requests the assessment be reduced as set forth in the appeal. Thank you. And Eileen, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I do not. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Mr. Peralta for the county, please.
Yes, thank you. For this case, Mr. Harmon pointed out that UO Clarendon was a tenant previous. Their lease was set to expire 12/31/2028. Industrious lease started 4/1/2021. So in this case, he did mention that it was sublet to Industrious, if I heard him correctly. So they're receiving rent previously from UO Clarendon, and their rate for 2021 was $46.54. Industrious is saying that Mr. Harmon is saying that they're on a percentage lease, and that information I didn't see in the packet itself. That's new information, if I'm not mistaken there either. I didn't get a chance to take a look exactly what's in the case for Industrious, if that was relayed to the department or not. But when looking at this case, we did see that the original 2021 versus the test, there's a difference there of the gross potential. And I'll try to point that out, and I did point it out in the summary sheet where the owner did not report any income for the Industrious space, as Mr. Harmon pointed out, for Deep Root Analytics for Primer Federal. So in this gross potential income that they're stating for operating year 2021 isn't indicative of a gross potential. As I noted there in line 1, column E, line 1, it's an actual income that was reported. It isn't a gross potential. I didn't do a reconstruction of column E, but had I done that, you could see what the actual gross potential of this property was as of 2021. When we retest this property, we do find that the vacant square footage, the appellant and the department agree at $35.09. There's a difference there in what they feel is vacant, is retail versus office. I believe the appellant included the Stretch Smart square footage, which is, to my understanding, retail. Clients come in, they pay to get stretched, and so I believe it's retail, and that's why the square footage difference is there with respect to our column F versus the appellant's column G. And looking at the differences in vacancy, we agree at 20% as of the first of the year. 49,559 square feet was vacant. We do agree at $9 a square foot. The history, as you see it, going back to 2018 is $7.35 all the way to 2021 is $7.18. So we're still at the $9, accounting for any lease up. This figure is actually smaller than what we saw in the last case. We're about 50,000 square feet vacant on this property. So when we look at the rent roll further, if the board may take a look at what we found in the rent roll, on average, we're at $48.34. And the most recent leases, 2021 leases, were at $49 per square foot. With that Turning back to the summary page, we do test at a higher value than what we had originally in the assessment, but we do ask the board to confirm the original assessment at 93,544,545. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members? Mr. Metzger.
I have two, excuse me, I have two questions about the cap rate. First one is the department. Please turn to page 2 of 105, number 4, capitalization rate. The department's written that the appellant states that the way the department sets cap rates, metro proximity, but more particularly effective age, and I'll quote, is not a recognized or approved method by any professional appraisal organization. All the years I've been doing this, that's how you've done it. But the appellant's stating that's incorrect. They may have stated it before, but it's here now today. Could you respond to that, please?
I don't understand that at all.
It's not approved. How you do it, effective age is not approved. Nobody does that.
I believe every jurisdiction does it, not to the same effect as the county, Arlington County. We have the ranges that we've set forth before we actually had the history of this, the cap rates in prior years, dating back to the Tommy era as the director. We used to have just, even wider ranges for cap rates. I believe there was a subsequent hearing that had happened and moved to adjust it and make it tighter, if you will. I believe we have 4-year increments that we have on the guidelines currently. So effective age has always been a determining factor when we're looking at the cap rate.
Well, yeah, in the years I've been doing this, that's true. But others, did you also say that other jurisdictions use effective rate as the primary?
Well, they have a similar fashion on how they deal with that. I can't speak to exactly, the methodology they use, but every appraiser considers effective age as part of the calculation when valuing a property.
Mr. Matzkin, may I address that point?
Madam Chair, what do you think?
Do you want an answer to that from the appellant? It's your question.
The appellant made the statement. I'm asking the county to respond to the appellant's statement, true or false.
Asked and answered. Okay, other questions from board members?
My second question on the cap rate. For the appellant, so you have a different cap rate. What did you base that on?
Let me respond, and then I'll do the first part. So in terms of effective age, all items associated with
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt here. You can do that in the wrap up. We're in questions now, so.
Well, I was going to answer the question.
Cap rate. You deny the county's approach. What's your approach?
Okay.
Well, we look at the stability and duration of the income stream, because that is what the market looks at. They look at the risk associated with a particular property. In this particular instance, because the board has been basically wed to the methodology used by the county, we adjusted the cap rate for risk associated with the property and the stability and duration of the income stream, as well as the metro proximity, important as it once was in terms of leasing.
So your touchstone was the county's conclusion on the cap rate, then you adjusted for other factors beyond effective age. Okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions? No? Okay, Mr. Protz, if you take a minute to wrap up then.
Yes, thank you. Yes, so again, when looking at this property, the 2021 INE does not report income that should be attributable to the future gross potential of this property. In the department's test, column F, we do account for those the income that was not reported. We don't differ as far as the rates used for the vacant square footage or for industrious space that was in question in the introduction of the case, Mr. Harmon. We're at the same rate as they use for that percentage rent. So they're using $35.3509. We're using the same $35.09. Again, we differ in the square footage amount used for the allocation of retail versus office. We do ask the board to look at the test and really understand that, you know, with the new information, it is a higher assessment, but we ask the board to consider the original assessment. The appellant is using a cap rate that's indicative of a non-metro office building. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. Mr. Harmon, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to address the rent on industrious first. Mr. Peralta has taken some extreme liberties with how he has inferred that we imputed rent. You can see to the right of the industrious rent, he has DREA inferred. We did not report it that way. That is an incorrect inference by the county. We imputed it at the actual rent, which is $0. That's the income that's attributable to industrious, and that is the issue of this case. You can see the county's imputed $1.4 million to industrious. That is not the same as what the appellant submitted. That is not the contract rent. That is not in accordance with state law, which requires that we consider contract rents when imputing economic rent. We provided a rent roll with current rents that Mr. Peralta said were not provided. We did provide that on July 22nd, 2022. There was no chance for a county hearing to explain any of the nuances that he has brought up as issues. But again, the main issue on this case is how to handle industrious. Thank you.
Okay,
I'd just like to add that industrious is not a sublease. It is a direct lease. UO Clarendon left the space. There is no payment from UO Clarendon.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it's just among the board members now. Where are you on this? Mr. Hoffman.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at the summary page. It doesn't look like in the last 4 years this property's ever gotten up to 6 million in NOI. So that's kind of my first red flag. You know, last year it's reporting 5 million. I think we really need to see the income from industrious, you know, reported as an actual before you could start to count that it's going to be $1 million or, you know, it's going to contribute that much to NOI. So, you know, I'm kind of in favor of looking at the appellant's column here. I think the numbers are, you know, they're in agreement on operating expenses. It's really comes down to that difference on potential income, and we haven't seen it happen yet, right? So, I mean, 5.8 NOI, it's better than 2019, but and it would also be a record-breaking year for this building. So I think that's a pretty fair number to go with. We just need to go back and use the guideline cap rate.
The cap rate.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Matzkin, I was doing some math here.
I just need clarification from Greg and whomever. The appellant's column G has the imputed income from industrious the same as the DRE test and F. So I mean,
Right.
I don't.
No, it doesn't.
No.
Yeah.
No, because what the appellant testified was that they did not report it that way. See the note on the side, it's inferred from the department.
Yeah, the
Okay,
county's
so-
got 35 a square foot.
So do you want to take the NOI down by that amount,
Yeah.
$1 million plus?
Yeah.
You didn't say that. That's what I'm asking.
They reported one number for the total square feet.
Excuse me, Mr. Peralta. It's just among the board members. I'm going to mute you.
Well,
We dealt with this all day yesterday with people popping in, and I'm not going to have it again today. Okay?
let me follow up on just so that I get clarity. Wouldn't, though, I understand it's percentage rent, and if they don't make certain, and that happens in retail a lot.
Yeah.
You know, over and above some base rent, which is usually lower, and they haven't met the threshold to pay the rent. But aren't we looking, it's a question, not a statement, aren't we looking at gross potential income? All things being equal, if they didn't have this unusual arrangement with the landlord, which personally I think the landlord was smart to undertake, they would generate this kind of money because that's what other office space generates.
Yeah, but I mean,
Gross potential effective.
asking a co-working space to count that as gross potential and then put a cap rate on it and say this is income forever, it's like, that's a speculative business that we've already seen fail in the last 3 years.
So you're in favor of making an exception?
I would say you don't count that income until they show it, until next year, that, okay, we made 200,000, we got a check from Industrious for 200,000. We've got properties that have cafes in them that we actually have to write a check to the cafe because they haven't met certain sales thresholds.
Yeah.
So, you know, it all depends on the.
Wow.
Yeah,
It's concession.
yeah,
He said that way.
it's an amenity.
So
Yeah.
you like G, but take out the Industrious imputed?
I like G with the county's cap rate, but I mean, you could also just make the adjustment on the column F.
And what final number do you come up with?
87, 793, 300.
Yeah, well, that's a sensible number.
Mary, we have,
Wait a minute, hold on.
She's doing that. Hey, while you're doing that, Mary, can I share something with Ken?
Is it germane to this discussion?
I think so.
Okay.
Your question, Ken, about the use of effective age as a sole means.
Okay.
I mean, it's not the sole means because the county
Yeah,
also
primary,
uses
primary.
location. But, you know, my guess is that that's probably something that they just use over and over and didn't alter it. They probably don't alter this much for each case. It's kind of what I'm thinking.
Okay, Mr. Huffman, what number did you come up with?
If I use column G with the county's cap rate, I get 87, 793, 300.
Okay, here's what I did. I took the test column and I just removed the 1.394 and then carried it down and did the 20% and kept the expenses where they were, and I come in at 91, 345, 398. Mr. Penranda?
I pretty much took a little different approach, but it comes up with a number that is close to yours. What I did is I used the test column, but instead of using the 45, 44 on office, the rate, I used the 3509. So that's the only change I made. And, you know, redoing all the numbers, except making that change only. The final value I come up with is 91,854,900.
Okay, it's pretty close. All right, so what do people think? Mr. Lawson?
Yeah, last night I actually wrote down the exact figure that Ray came up with. I don't know, I think any one of these is probably okay. I'm at the 87 million, but if there's not a majority at that figure, then I would go with the majority.
Okay, what do other people think?
I'm in favor of using the test column versus 40 years. That's my biggest item. I think the adjustment's correct.
Yeah.
But use it on the test as Mary did.
And just deduct out the Industrious.
Right.
Yeah, me too.
And it,
Me too.
it affects his expenses slightly.
Go with Jose.
All right, so are you saying to go with mine or Jose's? Mine's a little lower.
Yeah, I was thinking yours is a little more versus just adjusting the overall number rate. I think addressing just simply that one space.
Oh, I see.
All right, Ken, can you live with that?
Yeah,
Jose, can you live with that?
That's fine.
Okay, all right, then I will move to reduce the assessment to 91,345,400 based on removing the 1.3 million rent off of the test column. Do I have a second? Mr. Matskin is a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. It's reduced to 91,345,400. Okay, the next case on the agenda is RPC 150600004. This case, there was a settlement offer accepted last night, so this will not be heard today. So that comes off the agenda. And then, assuming we can still go on, it's only 10 o'clock. RPC 1507131 at 3101 Wilson Boulevard. If everybody's got that case up, then Mr. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about that property, sir.
Yes, thank you. 3101 Wilson Boulevard. This property is catty corner across the Clarendon Metro from 3100 Clarendon, which we just discussed. This property is a 212,000 square foot building built in 2002. Despite vacancy being 5% higher than 1 year prior and one tenant renewing a lease at a rate that is 7% lower than their previous rent, the assessment represents a $2.7 million increase over the 2021 assessment. We filed the appeal contesting the assessment's parking income, operating expenses, and cap rate. Upon review, the county lowered the parking income to our claim value and increased the operating expenses from $8 to $8.50. These changes, when incorporated with the correct DFL, would have resulted in a value of $94,687,000. But what did the county do in addition to what was appealed? Unlike a market participant, the county imputed $421,000 in termination fee income as other income. Also imputed vacant retail at an above market rent. These changes are why the test value is close to the initial assessment and not a reduction of $5.5 million. Looking at these issues in more detail, we see that one tenant exercised their early termination option in 2021 and paid a lease termination fee of $411,000. We noted this on the appeal filed with the county and did not include the fee as income. Since this money is a one-time fee, no income was due as of the date of value, the fee is not repeatable, and no market participant would capitalize such a one-time fee. The DREA summary page includes lease termination fees as other income on the 2020 and 2021 columns. This is not the correct way to report this as of the date of value. The county included lease termination fees as other income on the assessment and then capitalized this into the final value. This results in an increase of $6.2 million, essentially due to speculating that previous year lease termination fees will continue in perpetuity. Essentially, the property is more valuable because there are fewer tenants. The county's approach also does not account for which tenants are anticipated to vacate, and as such double counts the income. The county makes no adjustment to account for which tenants they believe will be exercising their early termination. They don't adjust the income or vacancy portions of the assessment, seemingly implying that no tenants will vacate early, yet some tenants will pay a lease termination fee. This doesn't make sense. If the county is going to impute the lease termination fee as income, we must follow the county's claim through to the logical end and find that it is illogical. Prior year termination fee income should not be capitalized. An example may be illustrated of the flawed logic employed by the assessment. Take an office building with 100,000 square feet of NLA, fully leased to two tenants, each occupying one half of the building. One tenant terminates early and pays a one-time termination fee of $3 million. The county's logic is that the building is now more valuable than before based on capitalizing this fee the following year. Essentially, the county is stating that the other 50,000 square foot occupant will also pay a $3 million termination fee, but still occupy the building and not terminate the lease. This posture is simply nonsensical. One last point regarding the termination fee income. This property has had tenants exercise early termination rights in both 2020 and 2021. What does this tell a potential purchaser? This tells a potential purchaser that tenants are leaving the building early, and why? Is there something wrong with the building? Something wrong with the location? Is the market not in great shape? What would cause tenants to terminate early? Yet the county's position is that tenants leaving the property before their lease end date makes the property more valuable. Next, the county imputes rent on the vacant retail space at a weighted average of the in-place retail rents. This is not a rate reflective of what the vacant space supports. If you're familiar with this building, you know that the portion that faces Wilson Boulevard consists of the TD Ameritrade Bank and the building's lobby. The bank has one of these corners, the lobby occupies the other. The vacant space is at the back of the building as you go down Highland Street past the coffee shop, which is the only other retail tenant. What the county has done on the assessment is taken the average of the bank retail rental rate and the coffee shop and applied that to the worst retail space at the property, which is again at the back of the building down Highland Street. Clearly, the vacant retail space will not rent for what the average of the bank and the coffee shop are at. Next, the assessment fails to account for the effects that reaching stabilized occupancy, in addition to record inflation, will have on the operating expenses. The assessment appears to rely on the 3-year average for operating expenses to support the imputed rate as stated on comment 4. However, note that this 3-year average includes year 2019, shown in column B, which is blank and shows $0 for operating expenses. This effectively skews down the average significantly. Finally, here again, the property is assessed with a capitalization rate that is not reflective of the market as of the date of value. The assessment imputes the exact same cap rate as it did on the 2020 assessment. Apparently, nothing has changed in the office market between January 1, 2020 and January 1, 2022 that would negatively impact the cap rate. However, as we have seen, office assets are riskier as of the date of value. Absorption has been negative over the past 2 years as office demand remains weak. It is widely known as of the first of the year that the Fed would be increasing interest rates, negatively impacting cap rates. The Metro adjustment afforded to this property fails to adjust to the work from home environment and the fact that Metro is running longer lead times on trains during rush hour. Due to these reasons, the cap rate should be higher in 2022 than it was pre-pandemic. As a result of the assessment imputing termination fee income, above market retail rental rates, below market operating expenses, and an outdated and inaccurate cap rate, the property is assessed over its fair market value. The taxpayer respectfully requests the assessment be reduced as set forth in the appeal. Thank you. And Eileen, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I do. By imputing rent on vacant space and the termination fee, basically the county is imputing rent on 9,000 square feet twice. So you either need to reduce the potential rent on vacant space by 9,000 square feet, or take out the termination fee. The other thing I'd like to say is this owner is in the business of leasing space, not achieving termination fees. And it is just ludicrous to think that the more tenants that terminate in a building, the more valuable it becomes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Peralta for the county, please.
Yes, thank you. For this case, address all the points that the appellants pointed out. For the leases in place, we have the same per square foot rate at $48.95, same allocation of square footage. When we look at the vacant square footage, we're at the same rate at $45 per square foot. You'll see that we did add a column E2 to this board packet, and you'll see that the potential gross income is at the 11.7 compared to what the appellant has at 10.7. Now, I could agree with the lease termination fees. We've done this in the past. We've seen this with a previous case where there was a termination fee paid, and we account for that. We've done this in the past where even the appellant has mentioned whatever is reported in the 2021 INE, it should be used. we have actually in the past and on the previous case kind of leveled things out as far as that termination fee or those other costs or other income is concerned. So again, we have done that in the past. If we exclude the square footage and include it as vacant square footage, we do include that termination fee. There's a bit of a gray area in how we, I guess the board has viewed that in the past. But when looking at this property, we actually don't have a difference in the vacant square footage. We both use 25% for this property built in 2002. It's very equitable with the other properties that are assessed using that 6.75 cap rate. The appellant is using a higher cap rate. We haven't adjusted cap rates for individual properties other than what the board deemed as non-metro versus metro. We do account for 1 year lease up versus the 2 years that the appellant has stated in their pro forma. When we look at the rent roll analysis for this property, I would ask the board to turn to page 6. The lease is in place, and you'll see exactly what rents were provided to us in the 2021 assessment. You'll see that the total leased area is projecting a rent of 7.5 million. You'll see it again. It's on page 6 of 97, and I didn't show that in the last case. And this actually shows exactly what is reported. It shows exactly what should be the potential for the leases in place. 7.5 million, 41,541. And that comes at an average of $52.03 for this property. And then when you look at the retail leases, you'll see East West Coffee, TD Bank. East West Coffee is paying $67.03 for their space. TD Bank is $73.12. The county uses $54 for that vacant space, $54.19 for the vacant space and for the leases in place. This is, providing the concessions for these tenants. So to say that the backside of the property would lease at $39.42 is a bit understated, I believe. Given that, we have leases in the building that have rented for much higher. So I'd like the board just to pay attention to that rent roll and see exactly what rents are being achieved for this property. With that, we're open for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members? No? All right, any final comments, Mr. Peralta?
No, thank you.
Okay, any final comments, Mr. Herman?
Yes, thank you. So column E, just to address some points that the county has made, column E2, this is rife with errors. It double counts income by using both rents received from tenants during 2021 that then vacated during that year. It then double counts the income by imputing it on vacant space as well. This column also doesn't consider concessions. The rent roll that Mr. Peralta cited to also ignores concessions in a non-uniform manner. The retail rents Mr. Peralta quoted, those are the grossed up rents that include pass-through income. That's not the way that the county applies the pass-through income. You can see on the summary page that pass-through is separate, reported separately. So by quoting those rates, he's double counting the income on those tenants. If we remove the pass-through income from those rates, the average is $55.37. The coffee shop's paying $50 a square foot. The vacant space is behind the coffee shop. Now, the main issue, again, is the other income. We do impute actual prior year when we know it's repeatable other income, not when it's a one-time termination fee that is not anticipated to be repeated. if that is going to be the methodology employed, we have to make adjustments to occupied office, the DFL, the vacancy rate. You can't have
Okay,
termination fees paid with no one leaving. Thank you.
all right, thank you. Okay, it's just among the board members? Mr. Hoffman?
I thought it was pretty straightforward. I took the 411,000 termination fee out of the test column and just recalculated the NOI and came up with 94,840,200.
Can you repeat that number? I'm sorry.
The NOI was 6,438,727, and then once you make all the deductions, the total, the net is 94,840,200.
Okay. What do folks think about that? Mr. Metzgen?
I'd like to address the retail space. It's too bad the county appropriately couldn't respond to the appellant's allegation that there was double counting on the additional rent, reimbursement, real estate taxes, and CAM and all that good stuff. But based on what I know about the rents around there, I'm going to conclude that the appellant's right. The base rents are in the 50s, although I thought the bank would get a better deal, to be honest, because they're banks. But more importantly, it's clear to me that the retail space on the North Garfield side is absolutely worth less than the retail space on the Wilson Boulevard side, for sure. And the county has imputed the base rent of $54 for the Garfield side and it says 10,000 plus square feet of vacant or retail. Oh, I guess it's really 5,000, the former Chinese. Anyway, I can redo the numbers, but I said that's base rent, $40 a square foot. If the Wilson Boulevard side is 54, 5, an average of 53 or 4. And so I would take Greg's point of view, because I think that's a slam dunk. That's just one-time payment and shouldn't be included. Even though the county said, well, we smoothed out other stuff to make adjustment. To me, this is too obvious. Just take it out and then just do what you think is right about the rest of the costs and the income. So I agree with, but I again would take down that retail gross potential income to more realistic number. It's going to be tough. I got a lot of retailers who would die before they would set up shop around the corner from a primary artery. I mean, you have to pay them to go there. So I think it's very much justified.
All right, other folks?
Anyone want to take off both of them or just the one, the obvious one?
Do you think
Mr. Yates?
Do you think the smoothing out that the county referred to offsets some of that?
Maybe, I don't know.
Of the 54.
Yeah, well, where's the smoothing?
That's what I was not sure.
Yeah, I just was paraphrasing the county. They smoothed it out. They made an adjustment. I'm not sure where. Look, the office rents, I'm comparing D and F. Office rates are the same. I do see it's a larger amount of money for retail in F, a larger vacancy, 10,000 plus versus 5,000 plus. I don't know why that is. I found that after question and answer period.
How much would that adjust to?
We're going to base a $40 on retail, that 10,000 at $40. Can we, what is the vacancy on Garfield Street? Is it 55,000, 5,000 plus more? Can anybody answer that? Or is it the 10,000 plus?
It's just among us, so they can't answer that now.
That's the right answer, unfortunately.
Yep. Greg, I can live with what you did. I don't know what other folks.
Well, it's certainly cleaner.
Yeah.
Because we still have.
And you're taking a guess. Oh,
Right, I don't like to be in the weeds.
Yeah, sure. Maybe it should be 45. I don't know.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, yeah,
Let's stay within our,
Yeah, let's stay with Greg's.
that's fine.
All right, Mr. Prenoranda or Mr. Lawson, any additional?
Well, I'm okay with that.
I'm okay.
All right, Mr. Hoffman?
I'll motion to reduce to 94,840,200 based on the change to the other income column
Deducting the one time.
from the county's test column, yeah.
Yeah, but I think you should say why you deduct.
We're
The
deducting
one-time fee.
$411,000 termination
Yeah.
fee that was included in the county's test under other income.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Lawson is a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, it is unanimous. It is reduced to 94,840,200 based on removing the 411,000 termination fee from the test. Thank you. And moving to the final case on the agenda, RPC 140600077 at 675 North Randolph. Mr. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property, sir.
Yes, thank you. 675 North Randolph is a 353,000 square foot building located between Wilson Boulevard and Glebe Road in Ballston. It was built in 2010 and has been leased to GSA since the end of 2011. The issue on appeal with this property is that the property sold in September of 2021 for $196,534,947. This sale was an arm's length transaction, was widely marketed, and was a good sale. The DREA test value represents a 2.2% increase over the September 2021 sale price. The Supreme Court of Virginia has stated on multiple occasions that it is well settled that a recent sale of the subject property, while not conclusive in determining fair market value, is entitled to substantial weight. With no significant changes in market conditions or property operations between the date of purchase and the date of value, the purchase price is the best indication of value for the 2022 assessment. The 2021 assessment was $195,387,000, which is right at the sales price. What has changed since January 1, 2021 that would support a $5.5 million increase? Again, the property sold in September of 2021 for $196,534,947. If we take the 2020 NOI and cap this out, that results in a cap rate of 7.2%. You can see the county only applies a 6.595% cap rate. So that could be where the error is. The tenant who fully leases this space is 1 year closer to their lease expiration in 2026 than they were 1 year prior. The market has not improved since January 1 of 2021. Yet again, the assessment has increased. The September 2021 sale price is entitled to substantial weight in the assessment, given that the market valued the property at $196,500,000. It appears that the county's cap rate is 60 points lower than what the market supports based on this property's income. As such, the taxpayer respectfully requests that the assessment be reduced as set forth in the appeal. Thank you. And Eileen, do you have anything you would like to?
Just that the property was widely marketed for sale, and the fact that the lease expires in 5 years for 100% of the tenant, for 100% of the building's net leasable area, tends to exert downward pressure on the value of the property, even though it is a GSA tenant. If that lease is ever renewed, the owners are going to have to spend a substantial amount of funds on that renewal, and the rental rate is very likely, given the current market, to be reduced. So I think that that was very important in the marketing of this property and in the valuation of the property in the sale.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Peralta for the county?
Yes, thank you. As the appellant pointed out, the subject did sell in September of last year. The county feels that the original assessment was pretty good as far as what they anticipated to be the income for this property. As you see in 2021, column E, this is what they reported as what they received, the actual income, not the potential income of this property. And that's what you've seen in prior cases and what you'll see in the coming cases with the remainder of the year. This actual income doesn't depict exactly the potential of the property. So when I looked further on into the rent roll, I added column E1, and this is what is shown on the rent roll to suggest what they're actually receiving, closer to $39.52. What a dramatic difference that is when you compare the gross potential of column E to the, gross potential of column E1. And this is along the same lines that I've stressed to the board in all my cases. The actual income is somewhat misleading as far as we're asking the owners to project what the potential gross income of a property should be. That's including vacant space, that's including all spaces included, that's including all parking, pass-throughs, and what they anticipate the project to achieve. Now, when we look at our original assessment, and we can look at the revision as well, we use just that. We use exactly what the rent roll is showing. We use exactly, in this case, there's no vacancy, but we afford 5% vacancy. And that's across the board with all projects that, are 100% occupied. So in the end, I mean, we've changed our assessment about $3 million compared to what we had originally. And that's still within reason from what the sale has occurred in September of last year. Projecting forward, as Ms. Borman has mentioned, you still have a tenant there for the next 5 years. So we believe the original assessment is a fair assessment, but even more so when we retest it, giving the new information and giving the information that should be reported in the I&E, not the actual income that they receive once they purchase the property. We're still within 2%, as Mr. Harmon had pointed out. Again, projecting forward, we have a qualified tenant, and they're there for the next 5 years. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members? Mr. Hoffman.
I think one thing I have a little issue with is the use of a general office building cap rate on this property, just because it's a government building and it's highly specialized. So how you treat that, you got to give more weight to the sale price than to equalization with other cap rates for marketable multi-tenant office buildings. We used to be right across the street from this building, and I'd look at it every day. And at the end of the lease, depending on what kind of what the government wants to do, it's either a fully vacant building or it becomes a home run, or it could be a real problem. So I guess if I have a chance to ask a question here, as I'm rambling on, I wanted to know, because you mentioned 5 years left on the lease. Are there any renewal options kind of baked in that that lease that DARPA has, or is it just a dead end lease renegotiated at the end of 5 years?
At this point, it's a dead end lease, and there is no lease in place or anything along those lines going forward after that expiration.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Matzkin, you had a question?
I did, thank you. For the appellant, on the actuals reported in column E, could you explain how row 1 office and row 6 pass-throughs for a very, very, very stabilized building could be so much less than the history of the building?
Yes, sir. So
Great.
the 2021 I&E was submitted by the owner who purchased the property in September of 2021. So that column is only from the date that the owner purchased it to the end of the year. So it's a partial year,
Great, great answer. Thank you.
3.5 months. So.
Okay. Any other questions? Mr. Yates?
Just minor question to the appellant. Would you address the parking? You brought it up earlier in the documents. Why you've adjusted the way you did?
Yes, sir. So when we were looking at this property, we knew we had a September 2021 sale. We knew what the case law states about fair market value and how an arm's length transaction is the best indication of what a fair market value is. So then we looked at the income potential at this property, and we said, how does this jibe with the sale price? So we looked initially at the parking income and said, okay, the county's assessment overstates parking income based on the county's stabilized rate for parking income. That's why it comes in $5.5 million higher than the sale price. Then another variable you can look at instead of the parking is the capitalization rate, which is more likely the culprit as to why the county's assessment is higher than the sales price. Again, just accounting for market risk and tenancy risk that the buyer accounted for in the purchase price that the county did not.
So to summarize what you said, you just basically adjusted the number despite what the history was. You dropped it 400,000.
We dropped it to the county's guideline parking rate, yes.
And Mr. Yates, you also have to remember that at the time that this appeal was prepared, we had permission to use what we had. So we had to get permission from the prior owner to use information, other information. So that was not allowable to us when this appeal was prepared.
Okay. All right. Any final questions? No. Mr. Peralta, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Yes. What was available to the appellant when they prepared this packet was the rent roll, and the rent roll clearly shows the parking income for this property. Just wanted to clear that up. And then for the cap rates, I think if you change the cap rates, it would be out of equalization with the other office buildings that are similarly assessed based on effective age. The sales that we've shown in our guidebook show that there should be a decrease in cap rate for all the sales that we've shown. With respect to this property, our assessment originally was within reason given the sale price of the property, and more so our test is within reason given what we've seen as far as the projected income of this property. So I asked the board to use the test value as their assessment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Harmon, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Yes, thank you. Just to summarize, what we are directed to do by law is to assume what a potential purchaser would pay on the date of value. The best sale we could have for these purposes would be an arm's length sale that closes on 12/31/2021. Here we have a sale that was in September of 2021. Pretty close. The county has not disputed the sale or justified how the property is worth more 3 months after the sale than it was at the time of sale, despite the tenant being closer to expiration of their lease. Equalization requires uniformity take a backseat to fair market value, and the county had information regarding this September 2021 sale, both at the time that they made the initial assessment and upon appeal. They just disregarded it and said, no, we don't believe that the market participants in this sale valued this correctly. They should have valued it higher. There's nothing to say that this sale was not arm's length, was not a good sale. As such, it should be reduced to at least the sales price. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Okay, it's just among the board. Mr. Yates.
Greg, obviously they're looking at this building early 21, the summer of 21, during the pandemic. How much do you think that impacts their assessment of what do we want to do to buy an office building?
I mean, I've seen this buyer transactions from them in the market, and they are very often paying top dollar, right? So they go for credit, single tenant, government occupied credit facilities, and they'll take a flyer on getting a renewal or getting money from the taxpayer to renew down the road, which will probably come up in 5 years. But this is a very specialized building, DARPA. So I don't feel like, I'm kind of inclined to go with the appellant's pro forma, which is slightly under the sale price.
But you don't think the timing in where we were in the market may have brought that down a little?
September 21, it really is
So
a
they were
function of
looking-
interest rates for this buyer. And we were talking about practically zero interest rates. So next year, we're going to take another look at it.
Right.
And as that lease gets less and less, I mean, that's why this property was sold, because of the risk exposure to that single lease. So, I mean, it's
So Shushan.
Shushan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shushan just got hit with a bunch of interest payments.
Mr. Metzger.
Just what Barnes said, we don't know what the seller's motivation was to take $500,000 or $5 million less, which may have nothing, which may have not primarily have to do with the potential NOI. Could be that that's just what I was thinking. Maybe they need the cash. As it turns out, Barnes has an insight that I didn't have, and namely, they needed the cash. But your inside, Greg, that they know that these guys are known to pay full bore. Personally, I think this is a very solid building with a very solid tenant that is unaffected by COVID, whether the individual employees show up at work or not, the rent's going to be paid. But the operating expenses would go down if they don't show up. Finally, my bottom line is 2.1% difference between the two is not definitive. If it were 22% or say, I'd say, well, there's something very wrong here, somebody's screwy. But this is too close to call after all
Right.
said.
I guess I'm going to just jump in here. I tend to agree with Greg. I mean, I look at this and think, what better point to tie this to but the sales price. I mean, this didn't close in January of last year or March of last year. It was September. And the talk about the client leaving in 5 years, I think we address that in 5 years, because who knows, it could get renewed. It may not get renewed, then we'll be looking at, spending X number of dollars. But I mean, even Mr. Peralta alluded to the sales out there would, change actually the cap rates, the sales that happened in 2021. Well, this is one of the sales. So it's kind of like you can't have your cake and eat it too. Oh, it's going to change it. But in this case, the sales price of 196 million it was an arm's length transaction. It was out there. We never know what the motivation of the buyer or the seller is, in selling something, but it's not like he put it on the market or, they put it on the market and dumped it and took the first offer. It had been out there for a bit. So, Mr. Lawson, you had your hand up?
Yes, ma'am. I read a couple of these court cases. I read them last night in some detail, and what the court says is that the burden kind of shifts when you have a sale, and that if the county's not going to go with the sales price, the county has to demonstrate why it's not arm's length. And so the burden shifts. It's always, the owner has to carry the burden of proof. But in a sales situation, it shifts back to the county. And so I'm going to be voting in favor of the sales price.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's useful information.
Okay, Mr. Penaranda, do you have anything?
Well, I thought that it's very seldom that we're gonna go just because there was a sale, go with the sales price. We normally look at all the numbers and see if it makes sense or not. It's like the previous case, it sold not on 2021, but it sold a couple years before. We just reduced it to 94 million, but that was sold for 128 million. So does it make sense to really work on the sales prices? I'm not sure.
But that was 2019. sale.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
That's a different world.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's apples and oranges.
Yeah.
With what,
2019 versus 2020.
with what
Well,
you're
this is 3
saying,
months from the, I mean, this is in the evaluation period.
Yeah, that's how you look for it, but the court, I think it was a different case than the owner cited. Because when I looked at the opinion, it then cited other cases. I think it was Ginsburg versus Arlington, but the burden shifts over to the county to show why that sale shouldn't be utilized. And although Rob has done his usual great job, I don't think he carried the burden to discard the sale. That's just my own judgment.
Yeah, no, I agree.
It's a great insight.
All right, Mr. Yates, can you live with the sales price?
yes,
Okay, all right. Does somebody want to make a motion? Mr. Hoffman,
I'll motion to reduce to the sales price of 196,534. Actually, you got it round, so it'd be 575 even.
535 even.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll second it. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Right.
Okay, it's 5-1 without Mr. Penaranda. The assessment's reduced to the sales price rounded 196,535 even. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Based on, Mary?
I'm sorry?
Based on
Recent sale.
Sales comps.
Based on the sale.
sales?
Thank you, County. Thank you, Board.
Thank you, Eileen. Thank you, board.
Okay. All right. Does anybody have any other business? No? All right, then we will stand adjourned here at 10:42. We re-adjourn next Tuesday, the 27th, and that is an all virtual meeting. So no one needs to come in. You can work from your home. County included?
Mhm.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Rosa, are we?
Anytime you see Boyd Waters,
27th, that goes.
they're buying a peak.
Rosa,